How would you like to 10x your property portfolio? Build it significantly faster than you ever thought was possible. My name is Ritchie Clapson and you're watching The Open Door Show. So on today's show, I'm going to be talking to you about how you can get your property portfolio built significantly faster than you could ever imagined. So let's have a start. Let's have a think about it because, there's a lot of discussion out there at the moment about property portfolios and buy-to-lets and HMOs and service departments. Should you have them? Shouldn't you have them? Legislation, taxation, and so on. That's for another episode, another time. But let's assume that actually, in the long run, property is always a good investment. In the long run. That's an interesting comment perhaps we ought to perhaps dwell on a little bit today, because I often ask this question. I say to people, is now a good time to be a buy-to-let landlord, or is now a better time perhaps to do something different, maybe become a developer? Well, I get a mixed opinion. People say it's always a good time to be a buy-to-let landlord. Yes, it's always a good time. Some people say it's difficult, it's a struggle, legislation, taxation is always against us. And it's going to get more and more difficult. The government is on the side of the tenants, not us as landlords. The government think we're greedy landlords. You're probably right with all of the above. But I think if you want my opinion, it's always a good time to invest in property. Property is scarce. We're not building any more land in this country. So to own property, to own bricks and mortar for the long game, it's always a great investment. It's no wonder that many of the Sunday Times Rich List have a huge portfolio in property. But I think there's a big difference. There's a big difference in terms of holding property for the long term and getting money out of property now. We often talk about passive income. And I think some of those times have become more challenging. And of course, what about where you start? How do you get into it? So there's a lot of people that we meet here at propertyCEO. They talk to us and they say, hey, I want to get into property. I've got a day job. I'm in this, I'm in that, maybe accountancy, maybe IT, maybe something completely different. But they want to get into property because they realize it's a great vehicle for that long-term asset growth. And people say, well, where do I start? And of course, generally, if people want to get into property, there's a number of things they want to do is they want to probably build up a financial pot. Build up a financial pot, which often means they probably don't have a really big financial pot. Maybe that relates to you. Maybe you're in that position where you're thinking, I would just like some more money. And more often than not, it's for the long term. People think about long term. But of course, buy-to-lets, we have over recent years, certainly the last 10, 15 years, we've had this ability, and it's got better over recent years, got worse again now, where interest rates were low to actually achieve a passive income out of those buy-to-lets. And that was good, and it was good while it lasted, but that is definitely more challenging. But the number one problem that I get when people come to me is they say, I've started my journey, I've gone out, I've bought my first buy-to-let, I've got my second, maybe, and I've run out of money. They run out of cash. Maybe you've experienced that. If you haven't experienced that, well, I don't want you to experience that because people get caught in this position. They get involved, they start a buy-to-let type journey, and they run out of cash. And they're sort of neither here nor there. So if you're in that position, or you don't want to be in that position, listen up, because I've got a solution that will get you over that. So let's have a think about it. We all like numbers, don't we? Maybe grab some pen and paper if you're listening to this and write a few things down. Of course, if you're driving whilst listening to this, please don't write anything down. Wait, pull over, or perhaps do it at a later time. So let's assume we had, let me give you some numbers. Let's assume we had, let's say, I'm going to say £50,000. Okay, let's assume you're in a position with £50,000 saved up. So you've got your savings, hard-earned savings. How long did it take you to get that? And you're ready to go to get into property. Okay, now maybe that's where you're at. Maybe you've got another, maybe £25,000 to do up that property. What can you do? What's achievable? Now, I've come up with £75,000 because that is the average number, according to the government, that people have available when they start their property journey. That's the average deposit size. Well, I'm going to break it down into 50,000 and 25 for a reason. So let me give you a scenario, the simplest scenario, which will, for some of you, this will relate to the journey that you've already been on as a buy-to-let landlord. For others, this is a journey that you may be considering. So here we are, we've got our 50,000, write that down on your piece of paper. Now, if you don't know, you can typically borrow up to 75% of the purchase price of a residential property on a buy-to-let mortgage. Yep, you can get a second home mortgage, get a rental mortgage to get that buy-to-let property, up to 75%. So let's assume we're going to buy a property for £200,000, okay? Let's go with, £200,000. So you're going to buy a £200,000 property in your area, in your town, in your city. So first of all, what does £200,000 get you? Maybe if you're not entirely sure, pause this open door show, jump onto Rightmove and see what you can get for £200,000 because I want to make this relatable. So here's a quick pause for you to go and do that. Hopefully you're back with me now. You've been on Rightmove, you've grabbed out there something and you've got some details. Maybe just give a little bit of description. What is it? Is it a one-bedroom flat? Is it a two-bedroom flat? Is it a two-bedroom house? Probably something of that order. Maybe if you're further up country, you can get a three-bedroom house. Maybe if you're in a central main city, maybe somewhere like London, you can get yourself a small shed for £200,000. Whatever it is you're going to get, let's assume it's a one-bedroom apartment. One-bedroom apartment, £200,000. I say, and maybe even print it out. Stick it to your notes that I'm asking you to write today. £200,000. You need a 25% deposit. 25% of £200,000 is £50,000. So write that down, £200,000, £50,000 deposit. We're ready to go. You're going to go and buy your first one-bedroom property. Now, maybe you're going to try and buy below market value a little bit. Maybe you're going to buy a bit of a doer-upper, okay? Because you know you want to actually get something out of it. You want to enhance the value. So maybe our two-bed or a one-bed apartment or whatever it is we bought needs a little bit of work. Well, that's where our other £25,000 comes in. So you've got to do a little bit of decoration. Maybe you've got to upgrade the bathroom. Obviously, you're going to have some legal fees there, bit of stamp duty. You're going to have other associated costs. So let's assume that eats into a significant proportion of that £25,000, depending on what it is you've done. Now, if you're having a look at the pictures you've downloaded, maybe you've downloaded something which looks like a real doer-upper. It's a kitchen, it's a bathroom, it's a complete decoration, it's new doors. In fact, the whole thing was trashed. Well, you might need a little bit more than 25 grand, or you might have to do a little bit of work yourself. But whichever way we're going to look at it, you're going to put in 50 and a proportion of your £25,000. Now we own our first buy-to-let property. Pretty cool, isn't it? You are now a property investor. You are now a landlord. Okay, you've got taxation coming your way. You've got to make sure whatever money you make after you've got a tenant in there renting it, you're going to have to put aside some money for tax. Obviously, you've got to comply with legislation. We're not going to cover that off today, but you're going to have all your certification in place. And of course, you're going to have all the agreements and contracts and deposits and all those things you have to do, which, to be fair, here at propertyCEO, it's not something we talk about or teach. There's others far better out there at that than we are. So there you are. You've got your property. We've got our tenant in it, okay? Maybe we've actually refinanced. We've bought it. We've bought a bit of a doer-up and we're going to try and refinance maybe after 6 months and get a bit of cash out. Now, those of you that's tried, maybe you've done this. Is it easy to get your money out of the property? It's not, is it? It's hard work. In fact, pretty much without doubt, anyone I speak to says, that's quite difficult. Buying right below market value and trying to get all of your money back out is nigh on impossible. There are a few people say you can do it, but I think that's few and far between. So a large proportion of your saved up £50,000 that you, maybe and your partner, have saved up over many, many years has gone into this property and it sits within that property. Now it's safe. You don't need to worry about that. That money is safe and it's in there. Of course, we might have put a proportion of our £25,000 in there and some of that money, well, hopefully it's safe because the value of the property has gone up a little, albeit some of those expenses, stamp duty, solicitor's costs, are wiped out. They're sunk costs. They have gone. So you've got to wait for the property to go up to actually cover those off at the very least. But you're in a position with a long-term asset. Now, what are you going to make out of that every month. You've got your long-term £50,000 that you saved up plus another 25. Maybe it's some inheritance. Maybe you've got some inheritance money from someone. That's gone into the deal. You're going to have a tenant in there. They're going to be paying you a very nice monthly figure to rent that property. What is the average figure, according to the government, that you get after you've paid all your bills and your mortgage in your pocket from a rental like that? Does anyone know? £300 a month. That's the government figure. So you put 50,000 in, hard-earned £50,000, and you're getting £300 a month. How do you feel about that? It's cool, isn't it? £300 a month. What could you do with £300 a month? Probably not a lot, to be fair, could you? You're not going to do a lot with £300 a month. That is not going to change your life. You might fuel the car a couple of times. Maybe there's a night out, maybe a bit of a meal. But that's it. It's gone. The problem's always going to be what happens if there's a void. What happens if that mortgage still needs paying, but there's no tenants? You know, your mortgage could be £1,000 a month. That's 3 months' rent. What if you've got a void? The tenant disappears. What if the tenant stops paying, but they're protected and you can't get them out? What if the boiler breaks down? There's another £1,000, £1,500, £2,000 gone. So very quickly, that money could get wiped out. So one thing you want to make sure if you're going to go on that journey is you don't rely on that income to pay for your lifestyle. Of course, the long-term investment is there. Maybe 20, maybe 30 years' time, that mortgage is paid off. Then that full, maybe £1,000 a month rent on today's terms is straight into your pocket. That's quite nice at that time. But you've got to get to that point. And of course, at the moment, we've only got one property. So it's okay, it works. You've got one property. Who likes the idea of that? Do you like it? I guess you possibly do. But now, what are you going to do? Because even in 20, 30 years' time, on today's money, £1,000 a month income, is that enough for your retirement? Based on today's money, a care home will probably cost you £1,000 a week. So it's not even going to get you a care home, is it? Not even a shed at the care home. So actually, you need quite a few properties. How many properties would you need? What if you had 10 properties, £10,000 a month coming in 20, 30 years' time? That'd be cool, wouldn't it? But how are you going to get those? You need 10 deposits. How are you going to get those? Well, of course, people say to me, oh, I'm going to refinance. Once it goes up, I'll refinance. Yeah, but you just increased your mortgage. So your 20 or 30 years is now maybe going to be 35 or 40 years. Ah, well, okay, I'll save it up. How long did it take you to save up that first 50,000? Maybe write that down. Maybe write down next to your 50,000 how many years it took you to save up that £50,000. Because that's how long it would take you, perhaps maybe shorter, because maybe you earn a bit more money now, to save up that next £50,000. Bear in mind, we need another 25 to do the thing up. So you can see the reality probably is that you equally will run out of money. If this is a journey you're about to start, maybe by writing down these very basic, simple numbers, you can see that your ability to go and save up another £50,000 plus 25 to do it up on today's money is going to be a bit of a tall order. And so it's no wonder that the actual average portfolio size in the UK for landlords, private landlords, is 1.5 properties. That's not going to get you a lot, is it? 1.5 properties, £300 a month, £450 a month. Yes, it's good, isn't it? £450 a month, not going to change your life. Okay, so we like the idea of property. We like the idea of some buy-to-lets. We like the idea of that long-term investment. But actually, if we look at it in 10, 20, 30 years, we might only have 3, maybe 4. It's not enough, is it? So how would you like to build it significantly faster? Now, maybe just as an aside, I ought to mention here things like HMOs, serviced apartments. You can obviously earn more out of that. A lot of people say to me, I'm going to do an HMO. Yeah, definitely going to get an HMO. That could get me £1,000 a month after I paid all the bills. Serviced apartments, £1,500 a month. But is that what you want? Is that the type of business that you want? I recently interviewed someone, one of our students here, on the Open Door Show. And the big thing for him was time. It was about time with his family. And he talked about his previous life, where he'd actually wanted to create time. A lot of my students tell me that. It's all about time. It's not just about the money. It's about having time. The money buys you the time. So there's no point, perhaps in some ways, getting involved in a business that's going to involve lots of time. Now, you can take your own views on HMOs and serviced apartments, but They have noise levels that go up from HMOs to service departments. You're dealing on a regular basis with customers in and out. Service departments, it's like a hotel. I stay in hotels a lot. I'd hate to be running a hotel where people like me turn up all the time, book in, check out, linen's got to be changed, so on and so forth. Do you want to run a hotel? Now, okay, I know you can get someone to run that for you. Of course you can. But sometimes they don't run it as well. Sometimes you have to step in. Maybe they make problems. So yes, it's definitely doable, but there is more noise. And of course, you still got a similar model. You've got to get the money. You've got to put that money into it. Now, there are various ways to do it. There are creative strategies. But actually, what about a way that we can build it 10 times faster? What about sticking with simple, vanilla buy-to-let properties that don't need a lot of management? We can put a tenant in there. They can stay in there 5, 10, 15 years. But actually, what about if we could build that portfolio quicker? What about, rather than wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to get our next property, what about within a year, we could get 10 properties? What about every year we could build 10 properties in our portfolio? What about if we could 10x our portfolio growth? That's what I'm talking about. And here's the solution. So, back to your paper, okay? You got your £50,000 and maybe your £25,000. Let's do something different. Let's start in a different place. So, we're not going to buy a buy-to-let. We're going to go out and we're going to buy a commercial building. That's what we're going to get you to do, a commercial building. Now, first of all, one of the big things about commercial buildings, their price per square foot or square meter is significantly cheaper. Residential's up here, commercial's down here. You always buy commercial properties a lot cheaper. And of course, we were talking about a bit of a doer-upper. Do you remember that? The bathroom, the kitchens, etc. Well, if you're buying a doer-upper, you're doing it from here to here. It's not a lot of change. Where if you take a commercial building, and what if we then convert that to residential? We're already taking it from here to here. In fact, up to here, because we've completely refurbished it. That uplift is huge, proportionally. So how can we do that? Well, we have something in this country, without dwelling on today's open door shows, there's plenty of open door shows. We've talked about this before, so go and check some of those out. We have something called permitted development rights. Now, for today's show, let's just take this as a very simplistic approach that short-circuits the planning system and enables you, as a potential small-scale property developer, to actually go and buy a commercial building and convert it to residential without the pain of going in the planning system. And by the way, the planning system in this country is broken. It's a mess. So, we're going to buy a commercial building, and there's a whole list. I'm talking about banks, I'm talking about offices, I'm talking about shops, I'm talking about light industrial, I'm talking about certain health centres, indoor recreational centres. I mean, have you seen those types of buildings? I mean, banks are shutting down all over the place. Any empty banks where you live, any empty shops? Have a think, picture those buildings. In fact, I tell you what, pause this video and pop onto Rightmove Commercial. Okay, Rightmove Commercial, and look for properties to buy. And go onto one of the filters and put in offices or shops. Have a look at that and see what comes up. There's going to be a pause now. I'll see you in just a minute. So, you're back with me. Hopefully you've got something there. You've looked at something. And hopefully you weren't driving whilst doing that, as I said earlier, or even jogging, because you could run into something. We wouldn't want that, would we? Health and safety is, of course, first. So think about it. You've got a property, you've got a commercial property. Maybe it's a bank, maybe it's an office, maybe it's a shop. Have you got a picture of that? Have a think about that. And maybe you found one around the £200,000 mark. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's £400,000. Maybe let's think about buying a commercial building for twice the price of the flat. Now you're probably thinking, come on a minute, Richie, I've only got £50,000. You're now going to buy twice the price property. Yeah, I'm taking you on a journey today. I'm going to buy twice the price property. That's difficult to say, isn't it? So we're going to buy a property worth £400,000. Have you found one for £400,000? If you haven't, pause this, go and find one, come back. Hopefully you're back with me and you've got a £400,000 property sat in front of you, a commercial property. Well, without overthinking this, imagine if you could turn that into a series of residential flats. And I'm going to present a scenario to you today. So typically, I could think of a comparison where we could actually buy for £400,000 an empty shop unit or an empty office unit that we could convert, let's say, into 4 flats, okay? 4 quite nice quality flats, or 8 smaller flats. Perhaps you could look at it either way. Now, let's assume we're going to buy that for £400,000. And you're going to write these numbers down, £400,000. Now, you can borrow up to 70% of the purchase of a commercial building. Maybe 75, but probably not. Let's assume it's 70. It's a little bit less than the residential, okay? 70%, a bit of maths for you today, 70% of the £400,000 is £280,000. So you need to put in a deposit, which is 30%, which is £120,000. Write that down, deposit £120,000. You with me so far? Okay. Now, you're probably thinking, hang on a minute, Rich. You said we could do this quicker with less money. I've now got to put 120 in and not 50. Maybe not. So just bear with me. £120,000 deposit, that's got to go into the deal. Let's assume that deal's going to cost us about 300-ish to do the whole thing up, okay? Maybe 325,000. It's a lot more, isn't it? A lot more than your 25,000 into your buy-to-let. And that's going to be a complete refurbishment. I mean, it's going to be rewired, replumbed, more insulation, more acoustic insulation, sound insulation, thermal insulation's got to go into it. Obviously, kitchens, bathrooms, internal stubbles, etc., etc., etc. Big costs. That's why it's not 25,000, it's £325,000. Now, here's the thing. You can borrow off of specialist commercial funders that were willing to support you out there right now, even if you're a brand new developer, when you know how to do this. And they'll lend you the whole of that £325,000. They're already lending you 70% of the purchase, the 280, plus the whole 325,000. Now, they're going to charge you interest on this. Let's assume the whole of that money, what have I got? About 300, another 20. Let's assume I've got about £700,000 I'm borrowing. Let's assume it's about 10%, maybe a few fees. Let's assume £75,000 worth of fees on top of that, interest that you've got to pay. Well, they're going to roll that up. There's no monthly payments. They're going to let you pay that out at the end once you actually develop out and sell these properties. So actually, altogether, let's assume we're going to borrow something like, I've got a couple of numbers down here, £800,000. Okay, we're going to borrow £800,000. All of that's got to go into the deal. Now, that includes your £120,000 deposit. Now, you're still thinking, hang on a minute, 50,000 a buy-to-let, I've now got 120. Well, you haven't. In fact, you personally, out of your own bank account, need to put in just 10% of the 30% deposit. Now, make sure you write this down. Deposit is 120. 10% of 120 is £12,000. You just need to put in £12,000. Okay? So we've got 50, haven't we? Well, we're going to put 12 of that into our deal. Just £12,000 into our deal. Now, I know you've already worked out 120 deposit, less 12, 108. Where's the 108 come from? Well, private investors. There is an abundance of private investors. In fact, you know loads of private investors with lots of money out there, but you just don't know that you know them. Does that make sense? Well, hopefully it will if you think about it. You just don't know who's got money. And imagine if someone has got money. Imagine if there were two people that you knew in your maybe business or personal circles that had £54,000 in their own bank, earning 5%? What if you could offer them 10%? What if you could double their interest return? Would they be interested to talk to you? I think they probably would, wouldn't they? Imagine they're going to lend you 54,000. You're going to give them double the interest back, maybe in 12 months. So all you need is two private investors. They lend you £54,000 each. Put that together, that 108 with your 12, you've got the deposit. And once you sell this thing out, you pay everyone back. And let's just think about it. 4 flats, I said, 4 two-bedroom flats. In fact, I'm thinking of an actual scheme that a student did. Worth about 250 each. Okay? Or if you want 8 flats, I can think of another scheme. Virtually similar numbers, about 125,000 each on average. That's £1 million. A gross development value. We call it a GDV, gross development value, of £1 million. Now, you're selling for £1 million, and you can recall when we stacked up these very broad numbers for today, we spent £800,000, including our deposit. And we've just made £1 million, less 800, we've just made £200,000 profit. Hopefully you've written these numbers down. Hopefully you followed it. If not, play this back, write these numbers down. This is very, very important. So here we are, okay? We're about 12 months down the road. 12 months down the road. We've invested £12,000 of our own money. We've bought a commercial building. We've got something called permitted development rights. We've done it up. We've sold it for $1 million. We've paid back all of our costs, which were £800,000, including our £12,000 and our 2 private investors at 54 each. The 200 is clear profit. Really important you understand that. That's clear profit. So where are you going to be in a year's time? Well, you're sat here, exactly the same place. You don't have any property. So you're probably thinking, how do we 10x our property? But just hold fire. You're actually in a position where you've spent 12,000, you've got the £12,000 back, okay, and you've got £200,000 profit. Well, let's just have a think about this. Let's just think about a time, maybe fast forward, that you've got educated. You understand how to do this, because you're not going to understand how to do it just from listening to today's show, but hopefully you're getting the principle. Let's fully leverage our £50,000. Let's really maximize that. So let's just think a little bit down the road. Let's think you're established, you know how to do this. Well, imagine that year of what you could do down the road when you know what to do with £50,000. We need £12,000 for a project. Well, 50 divided by 12, well, it's 4, isn't it? 4 12s, 48. 1, 2, 3, 4 projects. For your same £50,000, you could do 4 developments in exactly the same way I've described. Each development making £200,000. So a total, quite feasible, and I have students doing this, within a year, because this is an outsourced model, it's highly leveraged, you could actually run 4 development projects, deliver 4 times £200,000 profit from your £50,000 investment. Now, we're probably going to have to spend our £25,000 into this as well. Maybe there's a bit of phasing. Maybe we need another £25,000. But let's just think, as I say, a little bit down the road. You've just now invested your £50,000 and turned it into £800,000. So how do we 10x our portfolio? Because actually we're saying, property is a good investment. Well, think what we could do. Imagine that year that you started that journey and you ended that journey. You've actually got your £50,000 back and £800,000 sat here. Your £50,000 is ready to go again. Well, let's take our £800,000 and I want to buy 10 buy-to-lets. Well, on the same model, each buy-to-let needs £50,000. Okay, so £50,000 times 10. Well, actually, let's have £25,000 on each of them as well to do them up. Let's have £75,000. £75,000 times 10 is £750,000. I've got 800. So actually, within a year, I could buy 10 buy-to-lets, and I don't need to refinance them. I'm not desperate to get my money out of them. I can sit them there. Yeah, 10 buy-to-lets might bring me in £300 a month, which is £3,000, but I just reinvest that. I just hold that for those voids, those broken boilers, those problems that will come up. So they're not so much stressful. They're not so much pain. I don't have to have HMOs or service departments. It's a quieter business model, one that I can work and one that I can deal with. I've got 10 buy-to-lets. I've massively built my portfolio quicker. Oh, what else have I got? Well, I've actually still got my £50,000, so I can just go again on the whole thing. And of course, 750, I've got another 50,000. Get yourself a holiday. That would be good, wouldn't it? A well-deserved holiday. Imagine doing one of those every year, maybe every 2 years. That's how you can 10x your portfolio. So if you're sat out there and maybe you've got £50,000, maybe you've got another 25, the average property deposit of £75,000, you've got a choice. You can go and get that first buy-to-let and then stall and run out of cash like most other developers do. Or you could actually start being a developer. And a few years down the road, you could be in a position where you just suddenly 10x'd your property portfolio. And of course, the year after, 10x it again, 10x it again, 10x it again, and 10x it again. Have I opened your eyes? Have I made you think? That's what we're talking about today. Hopefully that makes sense. Go back, revisit your numbers, have a look at those buy-to-lets, have a look at those commercial properties. See what you think you can do. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's show. If you have, then please like and subscribe and you'll never miss another episode. See you soon.